He writes me a letter and he says, "Dear John, we have been informed by the IRS that we can no longer pay you under such an agreement at common law or in any other way, and that we must withhold 20% of your salary as backup." As backup? Now wait a minute, are they backing up their own backside, or is there what? I call and write a letter and everything else, and I get this clarification that according to certain codes and regulations, and according to discussions we've had with the IRS agent, blah 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 this and blah 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 that, etc., we must hold 20% of your salary as backup. He still didn't define what backup was. At any rate, he enclosed a letter, a form letter from the IRS. All right? And he said, "John, if you can find an IRS agent to confirm your position, we will gladly comply with your request." And I wrote back to him and I said, "How am I supposed to trust for a minute that the IRS is going to tell you the truth?" And he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "You remember that form letter you sent me? It says in there, under authority granted to the Internal Revenue Service under Title 26, blah, blah this, blah, blah that." I said, "You remember that part?" And he says, "Yes." I said, "Did you ever read Title 26? He said, "No." I said, "Did you ever read the United States Congress official listing of lawful titles?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, then do that. It's only 1 page long. You can handle that at least in 1 day. And I said, "You won't find Title 26 listed there. And furthermore, if you go down near the end of Title 26, you'll find a paragraph which says, 'Nothing here and above shall be construed as to have any legal effect.'" I said, "Now, wait a minute." I said, "Now, look, guy, I like you and all like that. I mean, you know, you're a bean counter and everything else, but I still like you. But in all honesty, when you've got a letter there from the IRS that you know has at least 7 or 8 lies per paragraph for 4 consecutive paragraphs, do you really, I mean, do you really think I'm so stupid as to go down and knock on the Mr. IRS's door and say, 'Hey, boy, I mean, sir, ma'am, whatever, would you come over here and affirm and back up my status at common law and tell the truth?' Does anybody think you're that stupid?" They apparently thought I was. Of course, I'm an actor. What do I know? Now, or at least I was an actor. The final item on the preliminary agenda comes down to this. All forms of contract in California, whether for public or private purposes, shall contain full disclosure to all parties to such contracts. Now that's important, and just as important as the next one, which is its companion. All right? So I'll go ahead and read the other one and explain both of them together because they're a match set. "No court shall, on demand from any party to an action, refuse to duly present its standing." Now, all forms of contract in California, whether for public or private purposes, shall contain full disclosure to all parties to such contracts. And no court shall, on demand from any party, refuse to duly present its standing. Why are those important? Because the courts routinely lie to you. You see, the courts routinely pull a case filed at law into equity. All judges above a certain level take an oath, a private oath, not to reveal the nature of jurisdictions, willingly or voluntarily. You see, there was a judge in Florida 3 years ago, you might have heard about it on the 6 o'clock news, that was supposedly assassinated by some wild-eyed and freako respondent in a divorce case, when in point of fact what really happened, as was later revealed through some rather clandestine sources, that what in fact happened was the judge began to expose his secret Democratic oath while on the stand, while on the bench, and the bailiff pulled his weapon and blew his head away. Wow. Same thing happened in Utah, or excuse me, in Idaho, about 8 years ago. See, The same way that the Secret Service was party to making certain that John Kennedy did not live to propagate United States currency, gold and silver basis, so also do those people assigned to protect the judges also know what to do in the event the judge does not toe the line. You see? I mean, you know, ought to be obvious. You take the man that's closest to him. Make sure he understands what his job is, to take him out if he gets out of line. Now, if you want to read a court case that'll really turn your stomach and see why standing is important, read Aikens et al. Versus U.S. 44 United States judges sued for relief from income tax, their salaries being reduced through income tax and inflation, etc. And the bottom line of the court the decision was, you fail to state a case upon which relief can be granted, and there is no remedy until death. Explicit statement in the case. These 44 judges went home, and half a dozen of them apparently resigned almost immediately from active participation as judges, and now there's only 6 of them left alive. That's a very important court case, and it tells you the judges explicitly, deliberately, willfully withhold evidence from you that would mean your exoneration. Because the court, without duly presenting its standing, you don't know what jurisdiction you're in, because the court won't tell you voluntarily. And if you make a demand, you may be, well, I don't know quite how to put this in a genteel way. You may be taken back to your cell where somebody that you've never seen before will come in with a club and probably proceed to beat you into a pulp. I've had 2 friends into which that's happened, simply because they made a demand that the court present its standing without dishonor. And in both cases, they got beaten up within a matter of 24 hours. They still won their case, and they still got out of there. And it was only by the grace of God that those judges are still alive, because they were ready to go back and take a .44 Magnum and lay for them in the weeds. Because they knew who ordered that punishment, if not directly, then by implication. Because the courts will not voluntarily, if you go in, people, and start pleading law, you're dead meat in a court of equity. Because there aren't any courts of law anymore, okay? All courts today are courts of vice admiralty, and that's just admiralty law inland, vice admiralty, martial law, bankruptcy, commerce, and receivership. And they're all courts of contracts. These officers will tell you all municipal courts handle is commercial contracts, the codes, motor vehicle codes. It's a contract. I explained that to a group of people one night, and there was a kid in there, 19 years old, rode a motorcycle, had just gotten a ticket. The next day, he had to go to court. The day after that, he comes back to me and he says, "Hey, you were right." And I said, "Thanks, guy. I was going in to pay for some gas and stuff." And he says, "No, you were right." And he's standing out on the concrete, you know, by the gas pumps, screaming at me, "You were right." And I said, "So what? What did I say?" And he turns around and he says, "I walked into that municipal court up there in Mojave, and the judge said, 'How do you plead?' And he says, 'I don't plead in this court of contracts. You don't have any jurisdiction.' And I threw the ticket on the other side of the bar and walked out, and they never did a thing to me." You were right. Well, there was 19 cars back there now at the gas station, and all these people are standing outside, and one guy said, "So he was right. Pump the gas and let somebody else get in line." You know, I felt embarrassed now, because I had to go inside and tell this lady what was going on and why we had 19 cars lined up out here at this pump going clear out onto the freeway and everything. Freeway off-ramp dumps right onto the parking lot there. At any rate, the point is, people, is every single one of these have been very well thought out. And we put a lot of time and effort into them. And I bring this agenda to you tonight, not as a completed document, but as a work in progress. Because I found out in the last 2 days at this conference that there's a heck of a lot of people out there that have an awful lot of contributions to make. Sometimes it's just a line or two, a word here and there, a form, a simple form. You know, everyone in his that I've talked to in the last 2 or 3 days has made contributions. It's been overwhelming. Because you guys just voluntarily walk up to me and show me how to win a case, and I didn't do anything. I didn't pay you for anything. I didn't ask you to come help me. You just walk. I had a guy walk up to me here a while back, and he says, John, he says, I got a real simple way to get an IRS lien off your property. I said, well, I don't have an IRS lien off your property. He said, I know, but if you did. And I said, okay, what is it? He says, IRS can't file a lien.